Hey everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of Beyond the Alert. Today I'm speaking with Rob Maxwell, Security Operations Leader, formerly from Chime. Rob, thanks for chatting with me today.
Nice to be here, Ann.
So you said something before we jumped on and started recording of that incident response is your jam, and I find that so admirable because it's almost like throwing someone into the deep end and saying, all right, figure it out.
You know, it's funny, and I sort of happened upon this, right? Along the way, it just turned out that this was the bit of the job that I really took to and was effective at. I think it's having done a lot of very technical roles, forensics and, hardcore technical security, the people skills that it took me a long time to realize were important really came into play once I started to develop them and realize that, I could kind of help people in this way. And it's fascinating me. What I've realized is that I'm one of, they talk about like when there's a fire, right? There are people who run away from it, normal, sensible people, and they're the people who run into it. Now, I'm not running into a real fire, not in a million years. I'm glad we have people that will do that for us. But, when it comes to, an incident, a security problem, an availability problem, that sort of thing, that's just fascinating. And helping to sort of marshal the resources and get them directed in the right way is just always such an interesting puzzle to solve.
And that's interesting you say that. I find so many times speaking to the guests on this podcast, the people in leadership management component is so critical, but no one ever talks about it in cybersecurity or very rarely. And the founders of startups say, that's just the EQ stuff. Who cares? Nobody really cares. What's the ROI? But at the end of the day, you're only as good as your team, right?
Well, I think so. And I think you need that team to stay around, right? You need them to stay effective. And if you don't have people sort of directing and guiding and developing those people, right, you need somebody to be looking after that. And I think, I mean, and this is something you see an awful lot in tech, right? People want to advance their careers and they want to get promoted, and somebody's got to sign off on I don't know, leave and timesheets. So somebody gets promoted into a manager job without any support, without any instruction on how do you be a manager? What does that mean? Like what's involved in this role? And some people take to it really well and do a great job. They take to it like ducks to water. And some folks really, really struggle in that, and it hurts them and their career prospects. And it hurts the people who are reporting to them because now suddenly they don't have support. They don't have someone who is a champion for them in the business. They don't have somebody telling the story of the team around the business so that, they're known and they gain reputationally and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always fascinating to me how we just, as corporate America, assume somebody just jumps into the role and knows what to do instead of being lost all of a sudden, right? Because how is someone just supposed to through osmosis figure it out? Like you say, there's some who do, but we can't assume that's the norm.
Right. No, absolutely not.
So this leads to a great next question. What do you think about junior analysts and replacing them with AI? This is such a hotly debated topic. What role should AI actually play in the modern SOC? As you put your head on your hands.
I will preface this that everyone should just get off my lawn now. I have been a skeptic from go and it's really since generative AI, right, really started to explode in the last couple of years. It does fantastic, amazing things. The label is really bad because it's not intelligent, right? It's artificial, right? It's really, really good, well-resourced machine learning, right? And it's a much better term for it.
We're all familiar with, and that's been around for quite some time, right? We're always saying it's like such a new hot thing. Not quite.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so there are absolutely great uses for it, right? But it really needs to be organic. It needs to be developed inside the team and applied in ways that make sense. And at this point, I still think you've still got to double check everything AI comes up with by a human, because the possibility that something goes off the rails and somebody doesn't notice until it's too late, I think that's really, I feel like that's a concern. The other concern that I have, we're talking about replacing junior analysts, right? Not senior analysts, because, you need that tier 2, tier 3 people to really dig in. Where do those tier 2 and 3 analysts come from if they weren't tier 1 analysts first and learn and, experience? I mean, you can just train them, but then what are they doing while you're training them to be a tier 2 analyst or they should be doing the analyst work. I think the other thing that's a little bit challenging is I have not seen an enormous amount of good work around the prioritization of security concerns. Like when you look at 3 different alerts and one of them jumps out and like that might really be a big problem, and these other 2 are things that we see all the time, and we'll get to them, but it'll be all right. I haven't seen AI really pick up on that yet. So that's an interesting niche that we need to explore, I think.
And how much do those tier one analysts flow into all the other areas in cybersecurity as they level up their career? Is that usually where it starts? So it creates an even bigger gap if we say, hey, we're just going to switch this out with AI?
I think so. I have had really good luck hiring both people who have done, I don't know, 3 or 4 other things, right? Network admin, sysadmin, and I lean to it. That's my personal inclination because that's what I did, right? I did a lot of things before I did other stuff. But then you bring a really good foundation of knowledge. But I've also, in more recent years, had great luck with babes and like interns, really, like people who, I mean, they can use a computer and that's about it, and skilling them up. And I think that's fantastic as well, and have had really good experiences there. But ideally, nobody wants to be an analyst for their whole life, right? You want to be able to move up through the organization, move out. It is one of the reasons why it's a little challenging at a smaller organization to keep the SOC staffed, because there are limited promotion opportunities. There are limited, abilities to go hither and yon. And so it's sometimes they need to leave to go find something more rewarding. But I think though, I mean, that's a pipeline, and it's an invaluable experience to work under the gun, to work under pressure, to have a feeling of jeopardy in the thing that you're doing. And also to be, I think the other thing is one of the things that attracts us to security in the first place is that sort of adversarial feel, right? The give and the take between the good guys and the bad guys, and all that. It kind of goes back to cops and robbers when you're a kid or whatever, because it's always different, it's always evolving. And if I mean, and I don't know that like coders get that experience, even if you're writing for security. I don't know that you have that.
Because you don't have that sense of urgency, right? Of potentially being thrown into the fire, being under the gun.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Well, and we see that sometimes when we pull those people into an incident and we're suddenly like, no, 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 we need you to fix this like now. And it's just like deer in headlights. They're like, what do you mean? It's a sprint, or they want to talk about a sprint. No, 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 not a sprint now.
Yeah. Interesting. So you've built SOCs from scratch and led global incident response teams at massive scale. What's the biggest misconceptions that leaders have when they're trying to scale their security operations?
I think there's a couple of things, and AI might sort of help with one of them. One of them is they want you to do more with the same number of people. Right. I mean, and I understand, like, I mean, there are fiscal and constraints. There are only so many resources, and what needs to get done needs to get done. But I think there are very often unrealistic expectations of what could be done. And some of that, and this would be my second point, I see scope creep, especially once you've built a really effective team that is good at incident response, that is good at doing that thing. You become, is it Maslow's hammer? Right? Suddenly everything looks like a nail, and they go, oh, hey, can the team do this thing that is out with that like initial remit, right? You can do vulnerability management. No, it's not really what we do, right? And it starts to become that scope creep really starts to eat into the ability of the team to accomplish things, which then eats into morale, because now the team has too much to do. And and as soon as they start asking the question, this thing, why are we doing this thing? This isn't what we do. You've got to start to address that.
Interesting. That's not something no one's brought up so far. So, when you founded the SOC at the University of Maryland, what were the first 3 hires you made and why did you prioritize those roles?
That question assumes that I had any idea what I was doing, because it was the first time I'd ever done this. And that I set out to say, okay, I need this and this. We hired 3 students who had an interest and some basic knowledge about cybersecurity, who had some people skills. Because, again, when you're dealing with incident response, it's a very social sort of thing, right? You need to be able to deal with, you're going to pick up the phone and people who don't know who you are and don't know why you're calling. You're going to have to explain to them, I'm sorry, but someone has taken over your computer, or, we have a problem and we need you to work with us. We're going to impose on your time. We're going to make your life difficult for a little while we fix this thing so that it doesn't get worse. And so we needed people that could effectively do that. And we got really lucky because those first 3 employees were really effective at that. And again, like I said about interns, from there, anything they didn't already know, they were very eager to learn. We could mentor them, we could coach them, we could educate them in all the bits and bobs that we needed to know. And then really the fascinating thing, because they were already in the mindset of being students, once they kind of hit the ground running, they were eager to learn more and more and more. It became a very like self-perpetuating, oh, I'm going to go learn this. Oh, I'm going to, that sort of thing.
What a great opportunity for them. And then on the flip side, also, they have the mindset of a student in the largest component of the university. So they have a much better idea of where those students may steer wrong, right? And accidentally click on something or what have you.
Yeah. Well, and they took great joy in calling a professor and being like, what are you doing? Because that would come up sometimes too, right? Never, nothing nefarious, but like, you really, can we put a password on this?
So, teaching cybersecurity at the university level, what critical skills are missing from most SOC analysts when they're first joining that team? This is a loaded question.
No, it's a good question because I came away from my experience at University of Maryland. They have an excellent comp sci program, right? And the course that I started to teach there was about offensive security and learning. And the great thing about that was, from my perspective, I went in with like, here are some technical things that you should understand, but also everybody wants to be a red teamer. Let's talk about the business end. Let's talk about what this job really looks like in practice, because it is not what you think it is. And we got some awesome results. And the great thing was, in terms of technical exploits and things like that, they already knew all that stuff. I didn't like, I mean, we would explore things and talk about things, but I did not need to teach them very much along those lines. They brought their toys with them, shall we say. But that was fascinating. And I think if you have gone in and gotten a cybersecurity degree, it is possible that you have missed a lot of the fundamentals. I mean, we've certainly seen people that come out of those programs that can explain to you like exactly how TCP/IP works, I mean, on a fundamental level, or, networking or those sorts of things. And that's a situation where, because you're at university, you've got all your requirements, so like your basic requirements, your English classes, your math classes, all that stuff you have to do. A limited number of like required comp sci classes or security related classes, and then your electives. And it really depends how many of those things really dig down into those basics. And do you come out with the fundamental skills? It's great if you can talk to me about like risk frameworks all day long. That's great. But as an analyst, that's kind of background noise. You need to know how to find that machine on the network.
Yeah, it's a theory versus practice, and it's so tricky in universities to get the practice.
It is. It is. And, I mean, I guess that's an opportunity where, like, if you can do internships, in your summers and get good work experience that way, that would be great. If you're at a place that's actually giving you experience and not like putting you in a program where you're just working on a project to show at the end of the internship.
Yeah, which is fascinating. So in Germany, they get all the electives out of the way before university starts. But the flip side is you really have to know what you want to study.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's tough.
Exactly. That's tough too. And then here with internships, at least on a marketing front, which is obviously very different, it's really tricky to find those great internships because you need someone like yourself who really wants to work with those interns, right? And give them a shot.
Right. Well, and you're back to, what do managers do? Like, why are they valuable? And that sort of mentoring and attention to the development of that intern is something that hopefully the manager has, some experience and some time for.
Yeah. For any interns who could be listening to this, though it's not necessarily our target audience, they could be your future job too, right? As you showed.
Absolutely.
So when you're hiring for your incident response team, what separates a good candidate from a great one?
I think those people skills, those fundamentals, I hadn't thought about sharing this, and now it's going to get out and it'll be ruined. But when I interview somebody, my favorite question to ask, I mean, you ask all the questions that HR wants you to ask and that sort of thing. And then my question is simply, take some time, think about it, and explain to me how the internet works. Like start with, you wake up in the morning and you turn on your device. Explain to me how you come to be looking at, I don't know, pick a website, ESPN or CNN or whatever that you watch, and explain the steps and leave it very bare bones at that, and let them then decide what parts, like, do I get link level explanations about, what's going on in the hardware? Do I hear about a Wi-Fi, like an access point, SSID, like, how do I hear about DNS, right? I mean, that one, you really want to hear about that one because you hope that's in their head somewhere. But there's so many levels, right? There that you could touch on all of the OSI levels. You could talk about so many different parts of that process, and it gives them the opportunity to really dig into what they know well, and then to highlight. And one of my favorite things is when they say, and then, well, this thing happens and I don't really understand how that works. I know I can tell you how I would find out, but because that's what I want to know, because we don't all know everything we need to know. But I mean, that's a given. And I don't yet trust Chat GPT or any of the rest of them to give you the right answer if you go and ask. I mean, I've been carefully monitoring what Google's AI summaries when I go searching for things look like, and wow, are there some whoppers in there. So it's, I really want to know that you actually know how to do research. So those are the sorts of things. And I think the other thing that's really critical, once in a while you run into someone who sees this as an opportunity to get a foot in the door to then move on to something else almost right away. And while I appreciate the thought process there, it's really important. We need the work done, right? Like, I hired you to be an analyst and I needed to be an analyst for a while. It's not that I don't want you to develop. It's not that I don't want you to grow and move on, but I mean, take a minute and, maybe, do the job and get some experience so I don't have to go hire you again, like in 5 minutes.
Exactly. That's the job market too. It makes it so tricky for these candidates. So, as you grow your team from 5 to 50 people, how does your leadership approach change?
So you start to think a lot more about resources, right? And resourcing for the team. And you need to set out, you're going to need more managers under you, right? One person can't manage 50 people. I mean, I think, most business research says 8 to 12 is a good spot for like direct reports, right? Span of control kind of thing.
You want to share that with some startup founders?
I can point to the research. They don't listen. I absolutely know they do not listen. But it goes back to there's that mindset that managing is easy and it's not important. So of course you can have 100 people report to you. I mean, literally at that point, you're just checking time cards. I mean, that's, it's silly. But it's important, I think, because again, each individual that works for you needs attention. They need to be managed. They need to be developed. They need to be listened to. They need to know that if they need something, if they need help, if they need guidance, if they need somebody to shield them from somebody up above who's mad about something that happened and they want to blame somebody, that you've got their back, right? I mean, I always viewed my role at the head of one of these organizations as the person who would take all of the successes of the team and lift them up to my leaders and to the company and tell that story. And honestly, it's been one of the most challenging things for me to learn how to do, but to sing those praises and tell their story so that that gets out. At the same time, when the hellfire rains down from above because something went horribly wrong, and that happens, that's me. That's on me. And I'm going to take the hit for that and make sure that, even if somebody on the team really, nerfed something, that's all right. That's my job. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, I think that's so mission critical to lift them up, but then to also shield them. And I think everyone's learned from the good and the bad managers they've had as they move up how both feel.
Yeah. But I mean, beyond that though, I mean, I think it's fostering, even whether it's a small team or a big team, you need to foster a sense of belonging and a sense of the ability that everybody feels like they've got each other's backs, right? It's not just that I've got their back, but I want them to feel connected as a team. I've along the way, I'm no great athlete or anything, but along my way with my kids coming up through school, I coached a bunch of, kids like football and stuff like that. And it's the same thing. It's getting a bunch of people to believe in each other and work together towards a common goal. And to know that, we're going to win sometimes and we're going to lose sometimes, and that's okay. We will still, whatever happens, be there for each other and just help one another develop and get better.
Yeah, absolutely. It's well said. What happens with burnout in this high pressure environment? How do you tackle that? Or try to prevent it as much as possible?
Sure. Yeah. Well, copious drinking, obviously.
That's where the connected part comes in.
Yeah. No, it's been a concern of mine. I suffered from it at times, and it's very difficult because again, it can be very high pressure, and there's a part of the analyst job that's a grind, right? We have tickets coming in, we need to deal with all the tickets, yeah, yeah, yeah. And so automating as much of the grind away is key. That helps, but it's not perfect and it won't ever get all of it, right? I mean, there's always going to be, you've got eyes on glass to deal with these things. And I have always taken the approach that I know some people don't like the metaphor, but we have peacetime and wartime, right? Peacetime is like normal run of the mill, and then we have incidents, and that's wartime. In peacetime, you are a little bit less accountable for your time and a little bit less accountable for, like, we have things that we need to do and we're all going to get them done. And you will be accountable for, did you finish these things in the big broad stroke of like what we decided we were going to do. In wartime, there might be 16-hour days, there might be 24-hour days, right? I mean, we might be heads down for a few days or a few weeks. Security incidents tend to run way longer than the availability people seem to get things back up and running much faster, right? They're not usually down for a month. Whereas like a security incident, when you're thinking about finding out what are all the repercussions and all of the things that got, touched and exposed and, notifications could take months. But it's important to make sure that people understand when we're not in that mode, I have more flexibility. If I need time, I can take time. If I need half a day, if I'm not feeling it, if my kid's sick, if any of those things, I have the flexibility to do the thing. It's also a reason why, I talked about resourcing earlier. Leadership sometimes fails to account for, you want people 24/7 looking at stuff, right? Eyes on glass 24/7, but you also don't want to staff for redundancy. Right? You have to assume, and you remember, and as soon as you start to work with people out with the US, right? People in Europe, people in like Australia, for instance, anywhere else in the world, they get a lot more time off and they take it. They don't hesitate. They will take that time. So I need enough people to account for the fact that each one of these people here get 5 weeks off a year and are going to take it, usually in August. And it's fine. Look, I love that. I think that's amazing. And it's even harder here in the States now that this, what do we call it? FTE. Like, we don't accrue time off anymore because nobody wants to pay for that. You just get unlimited time off. It's not really, it's always limited. There's always a policy that says you can't do this and can't do that, but it results in people taking even less time off. And you almost end up fighting with some people to say, please go away. Like, just take a weekend, go take a few days, go find a cabin, sit in the beach, just go pet your dog, something so that you can, relax. It'll all be here when you get back.
Yeah. And that's tricky too, because I feel as though the burnout piece is there's only so much up to you and the rest is up to the org and the company culture. To your point, people take less and less time off. When they do take time off, they have a pile of work ahead and behind that it's almost not worth it, depending on where you are, right? So I think depending on the company culture, you have more or less leeway on that front as well.
No, I agree. No, it's funny. At my last gig, we would, we frequently have like like a Friday off, or, we'd have 4-day weeks instead of 5-day weeks. And they were harder than 5-day weeks because it's the same amount of stuff. It's just in a smaller bag.
Did it make you more efficient though in terms of punting stuff that didn't make sense, like meetings where, the outcome is nothing?
Sometimes, and sometimes it was just like, well, I can work 4 10-hour days and I'll get all the stuff done. So
So maybe not as helpful either because yeah, interesting. So what is an automation decision you've made that has freed up your team to do more meaningful work?
my favorite thing from the last place was basically, we were a Google shop, right? G Drive, G Suite, all that. And we had lots of logs and we could see when people shared documents. That was just part of the logging. And we would alert on when they would share them, that button that says share to anybody on the planet. if they've got the link, because we know there are people out there, yes, they're very complex, random links. And there are people out there trying to brute force those things and see what they can find. So we would tell the analysts would reach out to somebody and be like, did you do this on purpose? And can we help you do this better the right way? So that isn't out there. Taking that and turning that into a Slack bot functionality where they just get pinged and they could interact with the bot and fix the problem. And now the analysts don't have to have that, because it's not that it was a bad conversation, but it was time consuming and it was common.
I'm sure. Yeah, I was going to say it happens all the time.
Yeah. So that was a good time saver.
So, in your experience working in financial technology, speed matters. Does everywhere for that matter. How do you balance the pressure for rapid incident resolution against thorough investigation?
I'd say anywhere that's a challenge. In my experience in fintech, we had an excellent and parallel fraud investigations team, right? Fraud and fin crimes. And we were able to leverage their experience in dealing with your common, like everyday sort of financial fraud to give us really good insight into, all right, so at what point do we hit the button and block a thing or block a person or an account or a bunch of accounts or whatever, right? We were able to leverage that experience with them and then, and at that point, just move as quickly as we could. But it's an interesting balance because in that regulated space, I would say at a straight up tech company that's not regulated the way finance is, you could just block a whole bunch of stuff and then turn it back on later and apologize if it was an overblock, right? In the regulated space, you can't do that because the person, the account owner or whatever, has certain rights that accrue because of the regulation. And if you do that to them, well, now somebody can't get gas when they go to 7-Eleven, and they have rights to come back at you and get some kind of, be made whole somehow for that. So it's a little bit trickier, and you're a little more cautious about those sorts of things. So, but yeah, it's always a balance. And I find too, this is where you want to have good relationships with leadership, like sort of up and then laterally at that point, to be able to set expectations, right? This is what we're looking at. We can let you know in an hour what we think how long this will run. And we'll let you know by the end of the day how bad we think this is. But like we need that space. And if you can block that out and give people something to look forward to, that's really effective. Because, when you get into it, to your point, a thorough investigation can go on for ages, right? It can take a long time. But the being able to say, well, I will report back in X number of hours and give you an update, then everybody knows what to expect.
Yeah, for sure. So now, second to last question. How do you measure the effectiveness of your security operations team beyond traditional metrics like mean time to respond?
I don't like those traditional metrics very much. I don't think they're very effective. Honestly, that is sort of the eternal question. I think how long people stay around doing the job and how much of themselves they commit to doing the work, I think that's a hallmark of how effective the team is. I also feel like, well, and when we do metrics, right, we would report out on, how many alerts did we touch this month? But we always look at it from the perspective, and again, this is part about telling the story. That's what I view the metrics as. This is how I tell my boss, here's our story this month. I want to show month over month change, right? Are the alerts going up? Or are they going down? What's the severity look like? How many incidents and how long are they taking? And why? Those trends help highlight both improvements in dealing with, whatever we're dealing with on a daily basis, as well as trends that are concerning. We need more resources, whatever that might be, a new tool, more people, some kind of innovation to identify this trend. So I think those are the things that I look at the most.
Awesome. So now I'm going to give you a question from our last podcast guest, Joe Albers, the Director of Information of Security Operations for Element Solutions, Inc. He said, one of the questions that everybody has to answer is, how do you plan on evolving your SOC as an organization? Because what we did 10 years ago is not what we're doing today. So what is your plan to evolve the SOC and your organization's security operations?
That's an interview question, right? I feel like this is that very challenging, think on your toes interview question.
Maybe he's hiring, we don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, give me a call. No, that said, I agree that you need to continue to evolve. And I'm trying to think back 10 years and what we were doing. I think you need to lean into being nimble, and you need to look at new technologies as they come along and leverage them as resource multipliers. AI will eventually, I hope, be that for many SOCs, right? You're never going to remove people from SOCs. I firmly believe that AI will be an excellent, powerful tool in the toolbox for, security response and defense, like active defense. But, I think constantly evolving what's in that toolbox and making sure that an analyst life can get very boring. We talked about burnout. We talked about the grind. They need to have time put aside so that they can train on these new technologies and not just muddle through figuring out how to use this new thing that just popped up on their desk today, right? They need time to go and learn how to effectively use these things. And I think that's where your evolution comes from. You get better and better, more effective analysts by letting them grow and educate themselves, and both providing them opportunities and providing them like direct training. And then I think it's a constant collaborative thing in industry. I don't think any of us really do this in isolation, right? We talk to other people who are in this business to see like what are the best practices going on out there in the world, and what are the bad ones too. Those are sometimes just entertaining and sometimes horrifying, but it's also a good way to learn lessons, right? We're not going to do that, but it's I don't know, it's a challenge, and I think like this is something that every time you talk to a leader, this is a really, really challenging question to try to answer. If you'd asked me this 10 years ago, I could not have in a million years guessed like where I landed today, and what it looked like today. And so looking 10 years forward, I can't imagine. I mean, it's going to be radically different.
Well done. It was such a broad, tricky one.
It's a big question. Yeah, I've just rambled for a while.
No, you didn't ramble. You tackled it well, I think, with the information we have, right? And we look at just what happened in the last 3 years with Gen AI and
Absolutely. Yeah.
what the claims are versus what's reality, and how some of our competitors talk about a fully autonomous SOC. We do not believe in that at all. We believe in human in the loop and augmentation.
Exactly, right. I would love to meet the individual who, decided we were gonna use the word agentic and have a long conversation involving a polo mallet. I don't wanna hear about agentic anything ever again.
Yeah, that's all you see at conferences these days.
Exactly.
It is your turn. What kind of a tricky question would you like to leave for the next guest?
I think to kinda hit on what we talk a lot about here today, I wanna know one of the questions I feel like a lot of people need to answer around this space is how do you make your SOC a survivable experience that people want to return to, that it's appealing and that it is a job they want to get in and stay in, right? Instead of get in and look to make the next move as quickly as they can so they can get out from under. So yeah, let's see. Because I would love some input on that too.
I will let you know what the next guest says.
Excellent. Thank you.
The floor is yours. How can people connect with you, learn more? Where should they go?
Well, learn more. I don't know. I don't want to own anybody else's education. I'm on LinkedIn. You can certainly find me there. And beyond that, I'm noodling through what my next move is, in the wide world. And so if, anybody has any interest in helping me on that journey, I'm here.
As a shameless marketer, I shall throw in my plug and say this is the best way to get to know Rob. He's given you input from everything from security experience to leadership and his mentorship style. So this is your go-to for getting the down low on Rob before you ask him to interview. Rob, it's been such a pleasure. We're out of time, but thank you so much for joining me today.
Great. Thank you so much.
And thank you to all of our guests.